Welcome to the 13th edition of the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. We are beyond excited to have you join us at this year's GALF, where stories, ideas, and imaginations collide in the most extraordinary ways. This space is a sanctuary for creators, dreamers, and storytellers, where every word shared is a bridge to new worlds, perspectives, and conversations. I got all that from Chat GPT. I was a bit nervous, so I just typed in my prompt, "Welcome writers at a literature festival." Chat GPT is very good. Listen to another line. Sit back, relax, and let the good times roll. Because here at ICG, the drinks are cold, the vibes are warm, and everyone's a friend. That was a prompt. Welcome drinkers at a bar. And one last line. This is a space of understanding, support, and hope. A place where you are not alone in your struggles. Guess what was the prompt? Calling guys for an Alcoholics Anonymous session. So it works. I guess we all sort of fall into these categories somewhere, and it's all merged now. GALF was founded in 2010, and this is the 13th edition. We've had some fabulous writers, publishers, artists, musicians gathering here at this fabulous venue, the International Center, Goa. I would like to request our speakers for today, Shumona Roy, Shanta Gokhale, our artist, Sonia Rodriguez Sabarwal, our poet, Ramesh Gadi, to kindly come on stage and join us over here. Bye, Vivek. Shumona Roy, can we have them all up on the dais? Shumona. Ramesh. William Dalrymple and Vidya Dehejia will be joining us shortly. So over these, you may be wondering, this started in 2010 and now we're in 2025. That should be 15. Well, it's the 13th edition because we lost a couple of years to COVID. There was no GALF at that time. But in these 13 years, we've had delegates from Goa, from the other states of India, Kashmir, Pakistan, Singapore, Australia, Nepal, Bangladesh, Kenya, Sri Lanka, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, France, the US, New Zealand, Portugal, a lot of countries. We have launched, Vivek tells me it's over 100 books, maybe 120 books. We have had over 500 authors platformed here speaking about their work in conversation with each other. This is truly a writers' festival where writers meet writers. Yay, Jerry. So, and there you are. We've got all these familiar faces. So good to see everyone here again. And it is ICG that has been hosting this beautiful homegrown festival here for all these years. We have the president of the ICG, Mr. Yatin Kakodkar, here with us. And I now request Dr. Pushkar, the director of ICG, to welcome this August gathering.
Good evening, everyone, and allow me to welcome you all to the 13th edition of the the Goa Arts and Literature Festival on behalf of the International Center Goa. I guess we'll all be settling down over the next couple of minutes. Keynote speakers, Shanta Gokhale and Shumona Roy. Artist, Sonia Rodriguez Sabawal. Ramesh Gadi. William Dalrymple, soon to arrive. And Vidya Dehejia, I thought I saw her, but I can't seem to find her. Co-curators, Damodar Mauzo and Vivek Menezes. Yatin Kakodkar, President of the International Center, Goa. Trustees of the International Center. ICG members, delegates, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. It's always a pleasure to welcome writers from all over the country, few from abroad, not too many, to the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. Thank you all for coming. A couple of minutes ago, it was mentioned that that GALF is 15 years old, but this is the 13th edition. Oh, something wrong with the balance. The first edition was held in 2010, and unfortunately, we had to miss 2 editions in between due to the pandemic. Now, GALF's longevity, 13 years, is due to the support it has received from ICG's trustees. But also, all festivals, and this is something I repeat every year, all festivals, any big event like this, needs financial resources. Since 2014, Mr. Kakodkar, Yatin Kakodkar, has been shouldering nearly all the responsibility for raising the necessary funds for organizing GALF. And that is something which I think deserves an applause. I was about to say sometimes with great difficulty, but it is kind of obvious, is it not? So it is not an exaggeration to say that we are all here because he has devoted a lot of time and effort this year, like in previous years, to get us the financial support necessary to organize the festival. Okay, I can trust the balance now. GALF is organized by the International Center Goa in association with Goa Writers with the support of the Directorate of Art and Culture, Government of Goa. For GALF 2025, we would like to heartfully acknowledge the support of the following: 3P Investment Advisors, Ask Wealth Advisors, the Dempo Group, the Department of Tourism, Government of Goa, Prudent Network, Axis Bank, and Broadway Book Center. A couple of minutes very quickly to talk about ICG. The center has existed since 1996, so it's almost double the age of GALF. The trustees of ICG have always aspired to make the institution financially independent and non-partisan. Today, ICG organizes a variety of programs independently or in collaboration with academic institutions and occasionally other organizations as well. Recent visitors and speakers have included Shyam Saran, the former Foreign Secretary of India and President of the India International Center, the writer Gurcharan Das, Sameer Saran, President of the Observer Research Foundation, drug regulation activist Dinesh Thakur, Sanjay Baru, media advisor to the late Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, Chinky Sinha, editor of Outlook magazine, Sanjeev Sanyal, member of the PM's Economic Advisory Council, and others. Since the past 5 years, and this is important because we are surrounded by writers, are we not? Since the past 5 years, we have supported writers through our Scholars in Residence program. We have so far hosted 12 writers for a period of 1 month, provided them with a stipend and a comfortable working environment, we hope, to work on their books. The result is that out of the 12, 5 have already published their books with some of the most prestigious publishers in India or abroad. I'll just list them out very quickly. Thomas Manuel, Opium Inc., How a Global Drug Trade Funded the British Empire, way back in 2021. Abhishek Chaudhary, Vajpayee, The Ascent of the Hindu Right, 1924 to 77, the first volume of a two-volume biography. Samrat Chaudhary, Northeast India, A Political History. And this year, in the last 6 months, Dinesh Sharma, Beyond Biryani, The Making of a Globalized Hyderabad, and Amrita Shah, The Other Mohan in Britain's Indian Ocean Empire. So 5 out of 12 is not a bad deal at all. We should have another 2 books coming out in the next 12 months. On behalf of ICG, I would like to thank our festival partners, Goa Writers, especially the curators Damodar Mauzo and Vivek Menezes. I would also like to thank Sonia Sabharwal for preparing the official GALF artwork, which you'll get to see in a few minutes. Not in a few minutes, maybe about 40, 50 minutes later. Thanks are due to all our sponsors and the many volunteers from colleges across Goa, without whom this festival would not be possible. On behalf of ICG, I would also like to thank our media consultant, Mr. Rahul Chandavarkar, somewhere around, our social media consultant, Mr. Michael Praveen, also somewhere around, and designer Sayali, who's not here with us, but in Pune. This year, like always, the media has been generous with their coverage of GALF, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you to all the speakers and delegates for joining us for GALF 2025, but I do not end here. Just a last paragraph. Finally, I would like to appreciate the efforts of the ICG team, so ably managed by Neelima Dasari. I think every delegate who is here has been communicating with her, and you have sent her emails asking about the schedule. Please, I mean, you can't be doing that. I mean, you should be asking Vivek. So Neelima has been very patient in handling all your emails, so please thank her. In the last few days, other staff members, Teja Nayak and Anupama Ghosh, as well as our support staff, the housekeeping staff under Sabina, and the front office have been of great help as well. All those delegates who are staying with us, you should know that your stay is made comfortable by the fact that Vivek Pathian, our general manager, is running the show. Okay, so if you run into Mr. Pathian, please thank him as well. So more than anyone else, two names you got to remember: Neelima Dasari, and also apologize to her if you sent her emails about, where's my schedule? Okay, so, and Vivek Pathian. I don't see him around, but he should be somewhere. Thank you, everyone. I have taken more than enough time.
Thank you, Dr. Pushkar. I brought a backup mic. It also looks like an award. I'd like to thank my mom and my dad, my fans out there. Or like Freddie Mercury, whoo! You can see one of the supporting teams out there, Goa Writers. Now, that's a group of writers that's older than GALF. It was founded in 2005 through the initiative of Victor Angel Ribeiro, one of our senior writers. And it's a group of over 50, 60 writers who meet once a month. They have a regular presence online through the Goa Writers Gmail, Google group. And we have the co-curators of this festival as very active members of this group, Damodar Mauzo and Vivek Menezes. They are the backbone of this festival. They have been so since 2010. We've had a lot of great writers here at the festival. Anant Murthy, you are Anant Murthy, Gulzar, Amitav Ghosh, Teju Kol, Ramchandra Guha, and we've had a lot of the Goa writer members here as well. We have Isabel here among us, and she's been active. There's a whole team of Goa writers members who have always been very active on this festival. There's Agust Pinto there. Agust. There. And Frederick Norona, Salil Chaturvedi, Sheila Jaiwant, Anirudh Sen Gupta. There's many writers who have been actively involved in this festival. So to also say something about the festival and talk about the writers at this edition, I will call one of our co-curators. We all know Bai Damodar Mauzo. I know Vivek is going to do the honors, but I have to say something about you. We all know Bai. He is very close to our heart. He had the recent great honor of being a Jnanpith awardee. He is stories, I think the Konkani stories that he has written are the most widely translated into English today. And he is also known, is very beloved to us for the work he has done for the recognition of Konkani as our state language, as the language of Goa. His fellow curator, Vivek Menezes, is very well known on the arts and literature circles. He's a 3-time Serendipity curator and widely published photographer and writer. He takes great pride in his photographs as well. and a real brother to me. So I request Vivek to address the gathering of writers.
Big hand for our Jose Lorenzo friends, founder member of the Goa Writers Group and one of the very best short story writers we have. We love you, Jose. Thank you all also to Pushkar and Nilima and the tremendous team ICG led by its president Yatin Kakodkar for the warm hospitality and constant support that has made this event happen 13 times over a full decade and a half. Friends, the last time I looked out on this very scene at the 2024 GALF Inaugural, there was Tarun Bhartia smiling in the back row. And he kept on smiling all the way through the next 3 days. We lost Tarun suddenly a short while ago, gone far too young. And the loss is immense. Tarun was an extraordinary filmmaker and also one of the greatest photographers of our time. His oeuvre is comparable to the masters of the genre, Sunil Jana from India, but also the likes of Sebastião Salgado. But that is not all, because he also created and curated the brilliant, highly inspirational Riot online magazine, an invaluable intellectual and artistic and most essential platform for the independent world view of all those who live in and around his home state of Meghalaya. It is interesting that when Tarun arrived in Goa last year, that smile I was talking about never left his face for 3 days. And at the end, he told a television interviewer that it felt to him like he had left his family in Shillong only to come home again in Panjim. He felt kindred instantly with a sense of belonging that goes far beyond the obvious. He recognized this place where he had never been before, and of course, we recognized him too. How can that be? Is that connection real? Friends, for Tarun and for me, and for you too, hopefully, what I am talking about is extremely real and significant and makes a big difference in our day-to-day lives. And to understand that unusual truth, that seemingly contradictory truth, I'd like to take us back to 2010. Friends, those 15 years since GALF was founded seem to have flown by on supersonic wings. And certainly our dear Bhai has remained evergreen, absolutely evergreen. But in fact, we live in a very different world from back then. At that time, two separate entities came together to pursue this idea. On the one hand, the former director of this institution, Nandini Sahad, had attended Jaipur. So thank you for that, Mr. Dalrymple, wherever you are. But our Bhai, Damodar Mauzo, had already been developing his own idea for a festival to incorporate the arts in the name of the great Goan exemplars, the poet Bakibab Borkar, and his very dear friend Angelo da Fonseca. With that vision backed by the Goa Writers Group in partnership, a robust partnership with ICG, this event was founded on the logic that has evolved from very long experience of the writers and artists of Goa. Friends, my dear friend Ranjit Hoskote, who is here with us today, has described Goa very aptly as an invisible river that has profoundly enriched India and the world, but is barely recognized and generally misunderstood in doing so. This extremely ancient little slice of the Konkan coastline has been a crucible of what is now called globalization for literally thousands of years, as far back as human history has been written. Open the annals, and Goa is always there, always open to the world, always the crossroads, always the entrepot. Many years ago, Amitav Ghosh stood in this very place with a marvelous GALF keynote, which I've read from previously, but please indulge me once again. Amitav writes, I have long been fascinated by cosmopolitanism, and the one thing I have learnt about it is that it is rarely to be found where one might expect. The cosmopolitanism of New York, for instance, where he lives, is a kind of provincialism, for it assumes that its existence is proved by the mere fact of having a variety of cuisines at its disposal. Similarly, it's perfectly possible to travel very widely and yet remain completely provincial. European colonial officials made a practice of this in the 19th and 20th centuries, and World Bank functionaries excel at it today. One of the ways in which Goa is new, says Amitav, is that it has invented a new kind of cosmopolitanism that is peculiarly its own. It is a cosmopolitanism of lived experience, a cosmopolitanism of inner dialogues, where the outsider becomes a part of the inner voice, sometimes embraced and sometimes excoriated. This voice is nonetheless not ignored, as it might be elsewhere. Friends, when Goa writers and ICG and Bhai and I first started thinking about GALF, we were clear about several things. First of all, even in those days, 15 years ago, it was obvious there was a fast emerging post-liberalization, commercially driven mainstream consensus about the literature and the arts in India. To us, from Goa, this kind of thinking has always seemed like a dangerous simplification of this country's unbounded, incredible, cacophonous, profound plurality. Certainly, even then, our Goa and the Konkan were already left out of this consensus. And of course, we are still left out in an age-old pattern I do not have to remind this audience about. But at that time, we were also aware that many other parts of the country and languages and entire genres were also being left out in exactly the same way. So, from the very beginning, our festival took inspiration from an acute line by the late great Eunice D'Souza, who said, "There are ways of belonging." 5 words, so simple, but they have become an awesome bedrock and framework for this festival. And that is why the best part of our legacy has been an unwavering focus on what others may consider the periphery, or marginal, or irrelevant. The result, my friends, as so many of you know and have experienced, and often tell us here at GALF, the result has been an awe-inspiring coming together. That explains why Tarun immediately felt at home in a place he had never been before. Look from my eyes right now, with all of you gathered here from the various parts of the world and India I know where you've come from, I know that what we have created is real. And at the core of it, I recognize Goenkarpond. I recognize that this is what Goa has always offered the world, and I'm very proud to stand here today in the living expression of our soul and our culture. Friends, it was a blink of an eye, but we live in a very different world from 2010. At that time, one of the early pillars of our event was rekindling Goa's long-standing, century-old collections to Karachi. And Pakistani writers were a mainstay of GALF until those doors were closed. We reached across in our years again and again to Bangladesh. But now those barriers are also too high. At one time, the Chief Minister of Kashmir, then and now, Omar Abdullah, flew to Goa with an entire delegation of over 30 writers and artists, people who might not meet in Srinagar, but over here we met and gathered and shared. But now that kind of thing seems impossible. The constraints are many. And here I must specifically thank Yatin Kakodkar for keeping the faith in the power of art and literature, and without whom, Bhai and I are fully aware GALF would be impossible. Yatin can tell you best of all that our constraints are many, and our concerns are even more. From the shadows, we seem to hear whispers. What if they say the unsayable? What if they have too many of those people? Look at the lineup. There's a bookseller from Imphal. 2 Africans. Thank you for coming, Shabnam and David. You really can't trust those poets. That one I agree with. Friends, let us not pay attention to the shadows. We are much, much better than that in Goa. These current geopolitical fashions are just another blip in our open world, in our open world view. Remember that just 1,000 years ago, a brief 1,000 years ago, in the ancient Kadamba port, the great Kadamba port just up the river. Those rulers were wise and canny and comfortable and secure enough to name an Arab as the prime minister. Remember that for many, many years, Goa was the centerpiece of an extremely far-flung Estado de India for centuries. And this capital here held sway from Mozambique to Macau, connected Brazil and the Philippines. The world has always been here. This is an open window to the world by its very nature. The truth is the truth, and everything else is just propaganda. This, my friends, is perhaps part of the great unsayable. Last year, in his incandescent address to this very gathering, my friend Ranjit, I'm starting to realize I rely too much on my friend Ranjit for these pearls of wisdom, but my friend Ranjit pointed out that writers and artists are always told this is not the right time and this is not the right audience. This is not the wisest strategy. This is far too controversial in nature. But why are we writers and artists? We are writers and artists precisely because we have found our voice. And events like this are precisely the best time, as he said, quote, to raise our voices, for together we are polyphony, we are community, we are assembly, we are solidarity. In solidarity with each and every one of you, and with every writer and artist and reader and thinker and believer who may watch this later. The Goa Arts and Literature Festival belongs to you. Moga Sundi Deobarikoru.
Thank you, Vivek. What if they say the unsayable or profound words or poetic lyrics? In the past, for the 5 or 6 times that I've hosted this event, I have taken it upon myself to educate the very distinguished writers here on our own mother tongue, Konkani. And I have been giving them lessons, just one phrase to learn every every edition of the festival. So let us see if you all still remember. How do you say good morning, a good day to you? How do you say it in Konkani? Well, you can repeat it after me. Deo boro dis dion. Would you please repeat after me? Deo boro dis dion. May God give you a good day. And what comes after that is easy. You should get it. How do you say good night? Deo bori raat dion. Raat is night in many languages. So, as a good priest would say, repeat after me. Deo bori raat dion. Deo bori raat dion. And how do you say thank you? Vivek has just used this phrase. How do you say thank you in Konkani? Deo boren koru. So it's, may God be good to you. I guess God is entangled a lot in our Konkani language. You don't hear this in Hindi much, do you? Bhagwan tera din, apka din acha karo. Aisa, I mean, my Hindi is not very good, but we have it in Konkani. I can hear someone laughing there. So, yeah, you all have done pretty good. And Mo Gasundi, just these 2 words, such beautiful words. Let there be love between us. Yeah. So that's your Konkani lesson for this time. There have been many great keynote speakers that have graced these occasions. And among them have been your Anand Murthy, Gulzar, Amitav Ghosh, Mridula Garg, Eunice D'Souza, Ramchandra Koha, Raj Mohan Gandhi. I love to hear him speak. And we've heard pearls of wisdom, nourishing words from them. And today we have 2 keynote speakers with us. The first of them is Shumona Roy. She's the author of 2 works of non-fiction. One is How I Became a Tree. It talks about what it is to be human in the natural world among animals and plants. And her second book is Provincials, Postcards from the Peripheries, where she writes about how people from small towns are equal and as good as their urban peers. She has also written Plant Thinkers of 20th Century Bengal. It's a work of literary criticism. Missing, a novel. My Mother's Lover and Other Stories, and 2 collections of poems out of syllabus, and VIP, Very Important Plant. Shumona teaches at Ashoka University, and I request her now to give us her keynote address. So you've got this slide here. That's the
Yes, I'm sure. This is okay.
It's okay.
I think it is.
Okay, sir.
Good evening, and I have many people to thank. First, Vivek, one provincial reaching out to another, a stranger about 8 years ago, the earliest supporter of my work. Thank you to you and your family, Damodar Bhai and Pushkar, for your warmth and hospitality. To my co-keynote speaker, it's an honor to be speaking at the same time and on this stage as yourself. To the two of you, to many of you here, whom I have to presume that you are here because I'm just coming out of eye surgery and cannot see you very well. I think I just saw Annie somewhere. Now she's disappeared from my... Hi. I don't know whether or how I'll have your attention. We like to hear only about ourselves, by which I mean not just ourselves as individuals, but as a species. The first novel in the English language begins with, I was born at York in the year 1632. It doesn't, for instance, begin with the history of a particular plant or animal on the island he eventually finds himself in. Or, if I were to ask you about Leonardo da Vinci's most famous painting, you would know the trivia about Mona Lisa's missing eyebrows. But you would all struggle to remember whether there are any trees behind her in the background. As in the painting, and as the history of portraiture reveals to us, the human is at the center of the frame of our attention. Everything else is peripheral, both to knowledge systems and the artists, and consequently, the reader's attention. I think you will remember whom you are sitting next to here, but you'll forget that miraculously beautiful tree over there. It must have been my conditioning as a peripheral creature growing up in the provinces, in the foothills of a sub-Himalayan Bengal town, that had made me interested in those who live in the penumbra. My interest in plant life, in photographing walls of northern Bengal over decades, writers and artists from a minority tradition, probably comes from there. What I'm going to share with you over the next few minutes is something I've noticed from my research and interest on the relationship between humans and plant life. Over the last 100 years, and a little more, scientists, artists, musicians, writers, filmmakers have, through their various media, been trying to find out the language of plants. The word language is not accidental, it's one they keep using. Let me put it rather bluntly. We, as a species, have been engaging in a quest to discover the plant script. It is this that I want to share with you today. There are quite a few reasons behind my decision to do so. The first is this, and I want you to think about this. What does it say about us at this point in human history if we are all thinking so seriously, or perhaps not even so seriously, about the plant script? The second is this. The quest for the plant script began in India. It is this story that I want to share with you. 2 months before the start of the First World War, Jagadish Chandra Bose was giving a talk about plant autographs and their revelations to the Royal Institution of Great Britain. He begins his talk with he uses this word, science of handwriting. Bose recognizes the unreliability of such a science. He's a scientist after all, but still chooses it to explain plant behavior. And I quote, so when I'm quoting, I'm actually translating Bose from Bangla into English. Under a placid exterior, there is also a hidden history in the life of the plant. Storm and sunshine, warmth of summer and frost of winter, drought and rain, all these and many more come and go about the plant. What coercion do they exercise upon it? What subtle impress do they leave behind? Is it possible to make the plants write down their own autographs and thus reveal their hidden history? Unquote. What Bose is seeking, therefore, is not autograph alone. Through it, he is seeking autobiography, the hidden history. Vivek just mentioned the unsayable. The name of Jagadish Chandra Bose's book is Obbakto, that can be translated into the unsaid or the unsayable, the hidden history, the Obbakto of plants. Writing this during the high tide of modernism, particularly British and European modernism, when the autobiography was becoming the most interesting site for experiments in writing and art, and also an entry point for those who had been kept out of literature and culture by gatekeepers, this urge for both the autograph and autobiography of the plant seems natural, at least the literary and cultural world, if not in the sciences. The sciences, like so much of historiography today, tells us someone's story of animals, objects, metals, the elements, the stars, and of course of plants. Jagadish Chandra Bose is signaling for a move from literature about them, a world available to us only in reports and paraphrase, to a directness that has been denied to everyone besides those who have had no agency to speak to humans in a shared language. So you see, he's almost inaugurating subaltern studies about 50 years before subaltern studies. I quote again in my translation from Bose, "Are there similarities between our nervous system and the plants? Can the changes in speed be recorded by the plant itself? Do plants have muscles like there are in the human heart? In the end, when death comes to a tree, is it possible to record that moment of nirvana? And does the tree respond fiercely to that moment before falling into an everlasting sleep? Only a history of these different moments, captured by different instruments, will give us the true and uninterrupted history of plant life." Unquote. As you recognize, this is the language of affection, of imploration, and indeed of activism, which we now think only for the human subject. I continue to quote from Bose, "To know the real history of plants, we must go to the plants themselves. That history is mysterious and complicated. To retrieve that history, machines will have to record every moment of a plant's life from birth to death. The script will have to be written by the plant itself, and it must have the plant's autograph. This is because men are often deceived by their motive." Unquote. And then we are allowed entry into the imagination that designed a variety of instruments, none of which seemed to have satisfied him completely, for he was always trying to design another one more sophisticated and acknowledging of the invisible life and history of plants. Some of these names, many of you might be familiar from junior science in school. The electro-optic analog, the shielded lens antenna, the resonant recorder, the phytograph, the plant phytograph, automatic photograph, the bubbler instrument, and of course the most well-known among them, the cresograph. The design of these instruments came from his living in both the physical and the botanical sciences. In this, his sole collaborator was a tinsmith by the name of Puttiram Das. He wanted plants to write their own autobiography in their own script, Toru Lipi, the plant script. Toru is plant and Lipi is script in many languages. His plant philosophy is one of the most non-anthropocentric practical philosophies by a human that I have possibly encountered. But it wasn't Jagadish Chandra Bose alone who was searching for a plant script. Rabindranath Tagore, who called Bose his first friend, Amar Prothom Bondhu, was trying to understand Phuler Bhasha, the language of flowers. What is this language of flowers, and why does Tagore turn to it as a metaphor to hold the lack of understanding of the ways of the mind? One notices in Rabindranath the groping for an analogy of the same interest, curiosity, and bafflement about the language of flowers as he does about other human languages, the syntax of the mind and the flowering world. The language of the flowers, which once in bloom, cannot be erased or undone, so we cannot press delete or undo. Phota, or blooming, is the foreign language that Tagore wants to understand. If I have to identify a refrain of thought in these songs about plant life, it is this: the curiosity about the language of plants, his acknowledgement about their unique form and fragrance as their language, his desire to understand both their lang and parole, and the impossibility of doing so. In one song, which I translate or paraphrase very badly because it is impossible to translate Rabindranath, he sings or says, "None of you," and it's almost as if he's addressing us here, "none of you will be able to make flowers bloom. No matter what you say or how hard you try, whether you lift it up day and night or injure its stalk, you won't be able to make it bloom. You might make it look faded or pale by staring at it constantly. You might tear apart its petals and branches and throw it to dust. Even if the noise and chaos you create might force its mouth open, you won't be able to take its color or rid it of its scent," he says in a song. It is quite obvious that Rabindranath is trying to understand a language that he recognizes, beyond the obvious, as not having originated from the human. We're so used to thinking of language as something that we've created. How does one understand such a language? Tagore goes to it both as a child and a linguist, imploring that understanding of communication as reaction and response, an intuition he shares with his friend Jagadish Bose. He locates the trigger of this language like the scientist did, in light. But he also goes beyond that, in locating the personality of the intelligence that has created this script. He is seeking both author and intention. What kind of language is this? He seems to be asking us, mother tongue or father tongue? Like language whose nature it is to generate response, the blooming of flowers is a sign that one must understand. Rabindranath understands it in various ways. And I'd like you to consider your own thoughts about blooming and blossoming and the falling of flowers and leaves when you think about Rabindranath. Where there is flower, there will be plucking. Is that part of its language too? This intuition of pollinator, this other possible end to life, to its life, like its transition to fruit is? We also encounter a different intuition. Is plucking flowers right? What is its equivalent in language besides perhaps it being ungrammatical to life? Falling and blooming, these are the two poles between which Rabindranath situates his plant language. It is not completely different from the parenthesis we use to mark the arrival and departure of a human citizen. That flowers bloom every day is both a thing of wonder and confusion for Rabindranath. He's seeking history and geography and geology in this flower linguistics. When I read Rabindranath, I sometimes wonder whether he saw the blooming of flowers as direct speech, flowers as beings that must exist inside quotes. That was 100 years ago. In April 2023, that's about 2 years ago, nearly 2,000 years of that urge to find the language of plants was collected by Katie Holton in her book, The Language of Trees, A Rewilding of Literature and Landscape. The book begins with what Holton calls a tree's typeface, a rewilding tool. On the left-hand page of the book is a tree's typeface, a tree alphabet, its name almost a continuation of a quest that began with Jagadish Bose's plant script. Holton, an artist, has chosen a tree, more specifically its shape, for each letter of the alphabet. I wish I could have showed it to you, but we can't here. So, A for apple, B for beech, and cedar, dogwood, elm, fir, ginkgo, horse chestnut, and juniper, and Kentucky coffee tree, linden, mulberry, and so it continues to sycamore, tree of heaven, umbrella tree, yellow woods, alcova, from A to Z. Holton does not choose A for apple because it is easy and obvious, the way we meet A for apple at the age of 3, for instance, in a school textbook. She chooses it for its form, for the visual resemblance between the structure of a generic apple tree and the letter A, turning a private manner of seeing into a very public typeface. Holton is an artist. Bose was a scientist. Bose's understanding of this language was through response, which is how plants and indeed our muscles and bones find form. Holton is recording form as well, but their positions on the arc are different. Bose wants to know the reason why plants are speaking or communicating in this way. Holton records without questions. Bose wanted to see this as autobiography and by extension history, plant history, thus giving them agency. Holton, with her eyes on effect, not cause, records the bones of what she sees. The Roman script on the right page, the tree script on the left, crowded when it's a long excerpt, almost analogous to a forest, spaced out when it's a single sentence excerpt, almost like a park hedge. The chapters are called seed, soil, saplings, buds, bark, branches, forest, family trees, tree time, roots and resistance, after trees, and so on. After noticing the obvious division of the book into its constituents as if it were a tree, evidence of a heightened analogous imagination between the human and the plant that marks our times. I myself am guilty of this in my book, How I Became a Tree. You notice the language, the alliterations, the seed, soil, saplings, buds, bark, branches, flower, fruits, forests, family trees, roots, resistance. And you wonder whether this poetic device that has been in use for millennia could actually be the language of trees. Holton uses a tree form for and, the way and exists on our keyboard, for instance. It resembles the shape of a V. And if you look around at any tree around us or even any plant around us, a tree tongue connecting two branches like the conjunction in a sentence does. I ask you to think about it. Does plant life know this conjunction? Where can we locate the and in the form of a tree? The urge to hear from the other side and not about the other side has changed the idea of the plant script in the 20th and 21st century. Botanical art, some of which I found in the way what you are wearing today, the two of you, for instance, and also in the frames at the ICG. Botanical art, a manner and mannered way of seeing plant life, whether as a species or its constituents, is no longer unidirectional. It is no longer a record of the human looking at the plant. The quest for the language of plants for its scripts is now an investigation, as all art is an investigation, into how and whether the other force, so far the non-actor, the plant itself, could create art. Like Bose tried to record the response of plants to external stimuli, artists want to record the autonomous behavior of plants or their paths to the elements. Art, therefore, is now about trying to understand the behavior of the plants, even as artists behaving like scientists put them in unexpected situations. I think most of you here would be familiar with E. E. Cummings's poems, A Leaf Falls with Loneliness. So the leaf falling, so it doesn't move from left to right, but from top to bottom. So a leaf falls, then Lone, then I, then, INESS, and so on. So leaf falls with loneliness, and yet in the script we find it in company, sometimes one letter, sometimes two, even three. This one particularly ironic, for it has the word one. There are many L's in the poem. They are the inaugural sounds of both leaf and loneliness. Even when they fall in company, as you would have noticed about the falling of leaves, they are alone, lonelier than they were on a branch. That is why Cummings's poems is a deconstructed branch, the leaves together, but not connected by any glue, such as the branch. Almost the way letters are in an alphabet. It's interesting to see that Cummings turns to the last phase of a leaf's life when he thinks of a plant script, though of course he does not use the word. Octavio Paz does the same. His poem is titled Coda. And I quote, "Perhaps to love is to learn to walk through this world, to learn to be silent like the oak and the linden of the fable, to learn to see. Your glance scattered seeds, it planted a tree. I talk because you shake its leaves." Paz borrows a few things from human language. First, the oral, silence, to learn to be silent like the oak and the linden of the fable. Again, going back to what Vivek said in his inaugural welcome note about the unsayable. After silence, which is of course the first letter of any alphabet, we think of A or or K as the first letter of the alphabet. We often forget that silence is the first letter of any alphabet. The analogical imagination about the language of trees or plants is older than the written script. It is perhaps for this reason that when the script begins to emerge in our histories, particularly the page and binding, languages begin reflecting this. What else can explain why the Bangla word for leaf and page are the same, pata? Similarly with Hindi, panna derives from the Sanskrit parna, meaning leaf. The Japanese manuoshu has been translated as collection of 10,000 leaves. In the early spring of 2023, I discovered, like many of you, through social media, that plants cry when deprived of water or injured. Researchers writing about their experiments with tomato and tobacco plants in the journal Cell had proved that, quote, stressed plants emit airborne sounds between 40 and 80 kilohertz. The reason we cannot hear them. I thought, of course, of Jagadish Chandra Bose, whose Torulipi, the plant script, is a record of a plant under stress, its injuries. If recent research proves Bose's deductions from more than a century ago that plants cry, does it leave out the possibility of laughter in the plant world? This is my question to you today. Is it possible for living beings without eyes to respond to the world with laughter? When I teach the rasa theory to my students, we often discuss their human-centeredness. We wonder whether we could imagine the same set of emotions and responses in a world beyond humans. Could they hold true for plant life, for instance? Jagadish Bose was mocked for his claims about plant sentience by a colonial scientific establishment, particularly in the United States. As I run through the list of rasas, I think of scientists in the last 100 years since Bose, having worked towards proving that plants do indeed feel many of these feelings that you and I do, the ones related particularly to stress and consequently impending death. But laughter? Why should laughter, hasyaras, be alien to the plant world? The leaves of the touch-me-not fold when touched. All of us know this. You tickle the trunk of a tree called gudgudi or tickle tree in Uttarakhand, and the leaves on the branches begin to move. I quote, "At first you think that it might be the wind tickling it," says the environmental journalist from whose video I first learned about such a tree in Katarnia Ghat. And he says, "Then you realize that it's not the air, for the leaves of no other tree in its surroundings are moving." Unquote. This is the thing. that the tree's response to the air, as in the shiver of the leaves, does not surprise us, but its response to tickling does. Charles Darwin, in trying to understand laughter and its place in evolution, argued that our response to tickling is not very different from our response to a joke. One must be in a light state of mind to be able to respond to both with laughter, he insisted. And of course, surprise is necessary to produce laughter. Did he mean to imply that only those with minds were capable of laughter? We know that many animals are ticklish, but trees? As scientific research reveals a new history of emotions in plant studies, I, and I think you might too, want to hear the laughter of the trees. We know from our own experience what causes us to smile, what causes us to laugh. In Siliguri, where I come from, where public trees have been lost to the construction of the Sark Highway, in Goa, in Uttarakhand, in provincial India, now drugged by the steroids of development, where is the plant life whose laughter we might be able to hear? Is it a coincidence that as we have become more and more distant from plant life, in a way that we no longer live in a world where we can take the neighborliness of plants for granted, we as a species have been driven by the urge to discover their language, their script? Isn't this the way morbid capitalism works? By making us try to remember and archive and cherish something capitalism itself has killed or destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Shimona. That was amazing. An expansion of language to all living beings around us. Perhaps 1,000 years from now, I won't be around, but the host will have the pleasure of introducing Ficus bengalensis as a keynote speaker, or Mangifera indica. Yeah. And I also found it quite interesting that a black and white dog tried to enter, and maybe he wanted to say something, and we haven't been able to understand him. I also found it strange that in all these Konkani proverbs that we have, I have published a kind of a little desk calendar with 365 proverbs. There is no mention of books, no mention of writing, at least as far as I know. But there is a lot of reference to Zada, Muda, Gormogriak, people. They keep referring to trees and plants and animals and take the wisdom and aphorisms from those elements. And they don't really talk much about books and writers. So perhaps we are a bit bereft of wisdom there. And now for our second keynote address, we have Ms. Shanta Gokhale. She is a novelist, columnist, playwright, translator, theatre critic, and screenwriter. Besides 3 novels in Marathi, she has published various books on Marathi and Indian theatre. Her literary work of 60 years has won her many accolades and awards, among them being the Sangeet Natak Akademi Award for contribution to the performing arts, and the Sahitya Akademi Award for her translation of Lakshmibai Tilak's autobiography. Ms. Gokhale?
When Bhaim also sent a two-line email to me saying, would you give the keynote address at GALF? And normally when I'm asked to speak, my first instinctive reaction is to find excuses to say no. I'm not a happy speaker, but I instantly said yes to him. And that was because I love being here. It's just the place that is so magical that bearing a bit of pain in having to speak to earn it, I didn't mind at all. Even now, someone is playing basketball in my stomach. Now, as I came from the airport through a fantastic greenery and the quietness, the peace, and the splendid Zwari River flowing by, I thought to myself, what a silly idea you had for your keynote address, because the thing I'm going to speak on is silence. And the reason is because all of us create whatever we write out of our immediate circumstances. And mine in the last 2 years have been particularly painful. 3 buildings in front of my house have been demolished. 3 buildings behind my house have been demolished, more or less at the same time. The human noises that this has produced were staccato, bang, interval, bang, interval, bang, interval. And at the end of the day, one had a headache. And also the unfortunate question, why am I trying to write, for God's sake? Demolition over, construction begins. And then we have machine sounds. And it isn't enough of a diversion for me to find words for the sounds that I hear. Thud, crash, wheeze, screech, whine, grate. All these sounds were being made all around me, setting my teeth on edge and really producing in me something that I think isn't part of me at all. A great urge to do violence. But then what did I do? I didn't go and throw the earth mover over into the sea. What I did was, of course, close my eyes, sit still, and try and absorb the noise. Meanwhile, telling myself that Mahatma Gandhi, with all his moral power, was still powerless against post-industrial noise. He lamented, before modern civilization came upon us, at least 6 to 8 hours of silence out of 24 were vouchsafed to us. Modern civilization has taught us to convert night into day and golden silence into brazen din and noise. What a great thing it would be if we in our busy lives could retire into ourselves each day for at least a couple of hours and prepare our minds to listen in to the voice of the great silence. The divine radio is always singing if we could only make ourselves ready to listen to it. But it's impossible to listen without silence. And yet, Gandhi did not live to experience the world in which our post-industrial noise is being amplified by information noise, where René Descartes' succinct statement of rationality, I think, therefore I am, has been replaced by I shout, therefore I am. In such a world, it is only art that offers us small islands of silence. I once heard Pandit Udayat Bhavarkar, the Dhrupad singer, sing Rag Bhairav in the morning. His alaps created a space for us that erased our own physical space. And at one point in his meditation on the melody, when he had reached the upper octaves, he halted at a note and held that note without drawing breath, allowing his voice to grow gradually thinner and thinner till it was no more than a glittering point of sound, which then faded imperceptibly into silence. In that silence, beyond the last audible sound, we thought we heard a universe of unheard sound. Perhaps that was the divine radio singing, or the spheres making their music. Most artists themselves need silence before their work begins. Dr. B.N. Goswami, the art historian, has narrated his experience of being in Zurich to attend an Indian arts festival organized by a local museum. There was to be a Kudiyattam performance one evening, and the curator of the museum thought it might be interesting for visitors to observe what was happening backstage before the performance. Quite a few people turned up. What they saw was actors grinding pigments, grinding pastes in complete silence, then meticulously applying those pigments and pastes to each other's faces, also in complete silence. Each stripe, swathe, and spot of color had to be applied just so, because each signified the character that the actor was to play. The process appeared tedious and interminable to the Swiss observers. Finally, one of them whispered to Dr. Goswami, "Why don't they use ready-made cosmetics? Would that not cut down on the time?" Dr. Goswami interpreted the question to the Guruji, who drew him aside and said in a low voice, "Please tell them that we need this time of silence because we are preparing to enter the world of the gods this evening." This is an experience that artists have narrated again and again. Prabhakar Barve, the artist, describes something similar in his book Cora canvas. The artist sits before a blank canvas, staring at it just as blankly. In a while, the canvas begins to look less blank. The artist begins to notice the weave of the canvas, an occasional knot in it, an ant scurrying across the frame. And soon, the canvas begins to throw up shapes and meanings. And then, as Barve puts it, the surface gives way to unsuspected depths where the artist's imagination rapidly follows. But this happens only because the artist has silenced the noise in his head, the noise made by thoughts, feelings, and ideas that he has brought in from outside the canvas. Unless his mind is empty, his imagination will not create fresh, new images. He says, when the artist's mind breaks through the layers of accumulated thought and attains its pristine state, it is as though a patch of deep blue sky has broken through a thick cover of grey cloud. Peter Brook, the theatre director, understood the importance of silence in releasing human imagination. For that reason, he practiced great economy in stage settings to cut down on visual noise. A bare stage offers the audience the silence that will free their imagination. That is his theory. But not everybody is looking for silence. When Brook brought his play, The Mahabharata, to Mumbai, the 1,000-seater auditorium was packed. But 15 minutes into the play, the audience became restless. B.R. Chopra's TV series, The Mahabharata, had only just wound up. Viewers had lapped up its sumptuous costumes, magic tricks, and declamatory speeches. And here was Brook offering their divinities, their gods, dressed in brown robes, miners' crowns, and speaking like you and me. The audience felt the gods had been degraded. But the Japanese theatre writer Shogo Ota went one further than Brook. He created a trilogy of plays in which silence became the mode for expression. His plays, The Earth Station, The Fire Station, The Water Station, were the product of three radical questions which he asked himself. He asked, why do I need costumes? Why do I need a set? Why do I need words? The Water Station, which we saw in Mumbai, answered all three questions with a resounding, I don't need any of them. Peter Brook said there were very few theatre directors who would have dared to ask them those questions, for such questions lead to a void where there were no markers to guide a director. But Ota wanted a void where not a single idea of what theatre was or should be remained. Only then could he create something truly new. When he wrote The Water Station, he knew that he might be boring the audience, but he was willing to take the risk to see whether the performance of actors simply moving choreographically to the background sound of water dripping from a tap would be enough to speak to the audience. As he expected, it did not speak to some, but for many others, it was an opportunity to discover in themselves the ability to hear unspoken speech. For that is what silence is. It is wordless speech. I spent 6 months of last year translating a book of essays on the artist V.S. Gaitonde, who was born to Goan parents, spent his early childhood on this soil, and drew his first pictures here. His way of being and his work both reflected the profound influence of Zen Buddhism. Towards the end of his life, he would sit for hours staring at a canvas without making a single mark on it. When his gallerist urged him to paint, he said, "But I am painting. It doesn't have to be on canvas. It's there in my mind." Ram Kumar, the artist, who was one of his very few close friends, has narrated in this book, which I translated, that the two of them would often go together, see a show, sit over cups of tea, till one or the other said, "Chalo, chalte hain?" And those would be the only words that had been spoken between the two of them. On this note, I would like to end with Pablo Neruda's poem, Keeping Quiet. Keeping quiet. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let us not speak in any language. Let us stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and a man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12, and You keep quiet and I will go. Thank you.
I had to contribute my silence there. Thank you, Shantabai. That was really beautiful. An exploration of silence through music, through literature, poetry, and yet we have to keep speaking. We have to move through words. I'm really at a loss for words. We have also seen a kind of interplay of silence with both the keynote speakers, where Shumona spoke about the silence that begins before the first letter is spoken, the spaces between the plants and their script, their language, and Shantabai spoke so eloquently about silence in every walk of life and every form of art. And talking of art, it's now time to unveil the artwork of GALF 2025. We have with us our artist, Sonia Rodriguez Sabarwal. Sonia, yeah, Jerry is a big fan. Sonia obtained her bachelor's degree in fine arts from the Goa College of Arts, Mumbai University. In 1992-93, she worked with a research grant from the Lalit Kala Academy in New Delhi. She says, my paintings are centered around a story of relationships, the tenderness of the human mind, body and soul, the meeting of human and organic forms of nature. I request the president of ICG, Yatin Bab, could you please come on stage, and Bai, let's be present at the unveiling of the artwork. Come, Bai and Yatin. Let's all unveil the artwork together. We've had many great artists, Amrita Patil, Lakshman Pai, Subodh Kerkar, Loretti Pinto, Viraj Naik, and many prominent image makers create artwork for GALF all these years. I also request our keynote speakers to which the unveiling of the artwork for the Goa Arts and Literature Festival 2025, the 13th edition, a 15-year-old festival, and the 13th artwork. A big hand for the artist and the artwork. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Bai. Thank you, Yatin. And we are going to have a small performance of a bhajan here by Apurva Khosla. She's also a student of Sonia's, based in New Delhi, and she happens to be in Goa for some work sessions. She is a student of Hindustani classical music of the Agra Gharana. I request, I think Sonia is going to tell us something about the artwork, her source of inspiration, and also about Apurva's performance.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A special thank you to the International Center, Goa, ICG, the Goa Writers Group, and a very special thank you to Bhai Damodar Mauzo and Vivek Menezes, co-curators of GALF. I, Sonia Rodriguez Sabarwal, am honored to be the artist for the 13th editions of the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. This festival has become and is a vibrant platform for creative minds to engage, inspire, and celebrate the power of words and art. I am honored in presenting my artwork titled The Goddess of Art and Literature. The Goddess of Art and Literature. The Goddess of Art and Literature sits gracefully holding a quill of peacock feathers poised in deep contemplation. This representation of the goddess is a metaphor from Kabir's bhajan, Jeeni Jeeni Re Bini Chadariya. The sacred verse speaks of the human body, delicately woven like a fine ethereal cloth, interlaced with the veins Ingla, Pingla, and Susmana Nadi, spiraling through the 8 lotus chakra. It is an embodiment of the 5 elements, each artistically represented: earth, water, air, and space, while the radiant halo symbolizes fire, adorning her divine presence is the vibrant aboli flower, the state flower of Goa, adding a touch to the celestial beauty of her aura. I present to you now Apurva Khosla, my student in the arts, to perform the bhajan.
Hello everyone, and I'll perform the bhajan for all of you now. Jeeni jeeni re bini chadariya, काहे के ताना काहे के भरनी, कौन तार से बीनी चदरिया, इंगला पिंगला ताना भरनी, सुख मन तार से बीनी चदरिया, 8 कवल दल चरखा डोले, 5 तत् गुण तीनी चदरिया, साई को सियत मास 10 लागो, ठोको ठोको के बीनी चदरिया, सो चादर सुर नर मुनि उड़ी, ओढ़ के मैली कीनी चदरिया, दास कबीर जतन से ओढ़ी, जो कि थ्यो धरी दीनी चदरिया, जीनी जीनी बीनी चदरिया. Thank you everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Apurva. Thank you, Sonia. And the artwork is there, resplendent for all of us to gaze upon. Goa is a very strange place. A lot of professions seem to switch around and change places. So you can have a dentist who turns into a financial consultant. You have a medical doctor who becomes a dance instructor. And you can have another medical doctor become an artist, a fine artist like Dr. Subodh Kerkar. And you can have a bodybuilder with massive biceps become a poet. And that's the man we have today, Ramesh Gadi. He is our poet for the evening. And he hails from Saligaon. I asked him what is his boli, what is his dialect. He said, Bardezi. We have Shashti, Bardezi, Pedne, Antrozi. These are the various dialects of Goa. So Ramesh's dialect is Bardezi, but it's of course understandable to us all. His poetry collection is titled Awa is alias Auntie. My mother has grown old. He has worked in Abu Dhabi, in the Gulf, in the corporate field, and he has his own fitness center in Saligaon. Azun Salta Mare Ramesh. Yes, he still works out. And his poetry is about the raw earth, the soil of Goa, the farmer. When I first heard him, I really felt that tingle up my spine of being in that knee-deep water among the paddy fields, listening to the birds sing. And that nostalgia of missing his village soil came to him when he was out there in the Gulf, in the Middle East, working and missing all this very intensely, as all Goans who have grown up in the villages do. So I now request Ramesh to present his poetry.
Good evening, everybody. Deo bari sans diyo. It's a blissful evening for us. Given chance to recite my poetry along with Shobana Roy on the stage and Shanta Gokhale. I feel like Gully ka Chokra batting with Virat and Sachin Tendulkar. And honor, I feel the honor is for my mother tongue Konkani, where I'll be reciting my poetry in Konkani about few verses. I'll recite in English. I come from a small village, as said, Saligaon, about 18 kilometers from here. Saligaon is a small village, agrarian village, but the village has changed. It has not remained same like before. As the tourism started growing, we used to have 2 barber shops, now we have 12. We have 2 petrol pumps, we have 2 police stations close by. We have 3 supermarkets. We have a garbage plant. Sorry, we don't call it garbage plant. Waste management plant. We take it insult when somebody says that it's a garbage plant. It's a new lingua, you could say. And very special thing, we have 3 old age homes. We boast about all other things, but not about the old age homes. Or does it suggest that we have gone wrong somewhere and we are not taking the care of our elders? I'll recite the poem in Konkani, but few verses I'll start with English translation to get the feel of it. For me, it will not matter at all. For me, it will not matter at all. Then you may rest my head to the north or south. Then you may rest my head to the north or south, to the east or west. For me, it will not matter at all. You may place that lit lamp. You may place that lit lamp near my head or my feet, near my shoulders or near my left ankle. For me, it will not matter at all. Into my wide open mouth, into my wide open mouth, you may put jaggery or sugar. You may, on my forehead, you may smear dark ashes or paint my face with the dark red vermilion. It will not matter at all. Let me start with Konkani. If you understand, then I'll carry on with the Konkani. I think Shanta Gokhale, madam, will definitely understand Konkani. And all Bengalis, I assume all Bengalis understand Konkani very easily. So Shivana Roy also. Our accent is same. We open the huge mouth. Am I correct, ma'am? Okay, so म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. मागीर तुमी ती निर्जीव म्हजी तकली पूर्वेक करात वा पश्चिमेक. मागीर तुमी ती निर्जीव म्हजी तकली पूर्वेक करात वा पश्चिमेक, उत्तरेक करात वा दक्षिणेक, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. ती घशीन काळी जाल्ली दिवली, ती घशीन काळी जाल्ली दिवली म्हज्या पांया कडेन पेटयात वा तकले कडेन, बुजा कडेन नाल्यार दाव्या डोक्या कडेन, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. उक्त्या म्हज्या तोंडांत तुमी, उक्त्या म्हज्या तोंडांत तुमी मागीर साकर घालात वा गोड. उक्त्या म्हज्या तोंडांत तुमी मागीर साकर घालात वा गोड. आनी कपलाक म्हज्या काळो बुको लायात, कपलाक म्हज्या काळो बुको लायात, नाजाल्यार रंगयात म्हजें सोंड तांबड्या भडक शेंदुरांत. म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. कण्याचे निश्णीक म्हजे, कण्याचे निश्णीक म्हजे कोणी मारचो खान. कण्याचे निश्नीक म्हजे कोणी मारचो खान, सरणांक म्हज्या उजो पेटोवंक पयलो कोणाचो मान. सरणांक म्हज्या उजो पेटोवंक पयलो कोणाचो मान. अरे नाका हो तमाशा फुकटो, अरे नाका हो तमाशा फुकटो, तुमी कोणूय पेटयात धोकटो, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. तोंडा वयल्यान मारीत बोबो म्हजो शिवडो कोण गा फुटतलो. तोंडा वयल्यान मारीत बोबो म्हजो शिवडो कोण गा फुटतलो. तांबयान भरून तीर्थार व्हरून म्हज्यो अस्थी कोण गा सोडटलो. अरे ती म्हज्या म्हाताऱ्या हाडांची पूड, ती म्हज्या म्हाताऱ्या हाडांची पूड तुमी गंगे सोडात वा सोडात व्हरून घरा फाटल्या हागुड्ड्या व्हाळात, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. रांदचे कुडीक म्हज्या बाराव्याक, रांदचे कुडीक म्हज्या बाराव्याक जेवण कसलें शिजतलें. रांदचे कुडीक म्हज्या बाराव्याक जेवण कसलें शिजतलें. पोरन्यो म्हज्यो यादी काडून शेले कितले भिजतले. पोरन्यो म्हज्यो यादी काडून शेले कितले भिजतले. सुतीक सोंपलें म्हणून दायजी खोशयेन वचून न्हिदतले. न्हिदों राणीचे म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. केळी खोल्यार पिंड ठेवून कावळ्याक कोण जापयतलो. केळी खोल्यार पिंड ठेवून कावळ्याक कोण जापयतलो. यो रे कावळ्या खा रे पिंड, काकूळटायेन आपयतलो. मागीर तो लेंवटी मुड्यो कावळो, तो मागीर लेंवटो मुडी कावळो चांचयत पिंड खातलो काय पयस खंय तरी उडून वतलो. वचूं बाबडो, म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. अरे कुडींतलें आटोवन रगत तुमकां आमी करता व्हड. कुडींतलें आटोवन रगत तुमकां आमी करता व्हड. जाणटेपणी आमचेंच वजें तुमकां लागूंक लागता जड. जाणटेपणी आमचेंच वजें तुमकां लागूंक लागता जड. भाटां बेसां इस्टेटीर फक्त आसता तुमची नदर. सांगात कशें लाभलें यश तुमकां आवय बापाय बगर. सांगात कशें लाभलें यश तुमकां आवय बापाय बगर. आयक, मेल्या उपरांत नाका विधी, नाका म्हाळ, नाका श्राद्दां, नाका तुजें पिंडदान. जाताच जाल्यार जाणटेपणार दियात आदाराचो खान. देव बरें करूं. So do you understand the Konkani version, or do you? So should I stick to Konkani? It's like, it's like having a original orange juice and Tetra Pak orange juice. If I have the translated version, it will be like Tetra Pak orange juice. So you want the original or Tetra Pak? Good. Thank you. As I said, I was in GALF. I was not a poet or writer at all. I was an athlete. I'm a farmer. I had my cattle, I had my milk business, and then I went to GALF. And I got lost. It was like going from a garden to a desert. I felt very nostalgic. I used to work for a health club. While going to the health club on the way, I used to get a garden, a grass cutter, Sri Lankan grass cutter. I used to meet him every day with his lawn mower. I used to stand there for 10 minutes and watch him. Then we had a horse stable. There were two Pakistanis, Asmat and Ibrahim. They became my friend. I used to spend my 10-15 minutes over there. My Goan friends who used to work with me, they got really irritated. अरे पर वचून त्या पाकिस्तानाकडे आणि त्या श्रीलंकनाकडे वचून रावता. Why I should stand next to the gardener? The smell of the garden used to take me to Goa. I used to feel very sentimental. And the horse stable, I used to feel like I'm standing in my cow shed. In the evening when I told my friends because of that smell of the soil, I'm standing over there. One of my friends from Perne said, then why don't you tell your mother to send some soil? That was before 25 years. I used to write long, long letters. So in fact, I told my mother, send some soil. So she was scared. भुरग्याक कितें तरी जालें आं, तो सांगता माती बी धाड म्हणून, मातसो प्रसाद घे. My mother told my father, better go to the temple. Something wrong with the son. He is asking me to send some soil in the letter. So, in the evening, I used to always write my diary. I wrote few lines on my diary, and that became my poetry. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. Let me recite to you. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. फांतोडीचेर सपनांत येता शेतां आनी माड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. गोट्या फाटलें तणा फुडें घरां म्हाका आपयता. गोट्या फाटलें तणा फुडें घरां म्हाका आपयता. किरकिऱ्याचें मस्तें पोर न्हिदेंतल्यान जागयता. किरकिऱ्याचें मस्तें पोर न्हिदेंतल्यान जागयता. नजरे मुखार नेमान येता पंगाऱ्याचें झाड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. घरच्या शिरब्या हळसाण्याचें सामारे गे दिसता खायन. घरच्या शिरब्या हळसाण्याचें सामारे गे दिसता खायन. दांत्या वयल्यो पोरण्यो ओवयो तुज्या वांगडा दिसता गायन. धाडूंक म्हाका पोरसान वचून मस्का शेंगू काड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. पयशा फाटल्यान धांवपाचो हो खेळ आमी मांडलो गे. पयशा फाटल्यान धांवपाचो हो खेळ आमी मांडलो गे. कुडी जरी आमच्यो हांगा काळजा गाबे सांडले गे. दोळ्या मुखार धांवून येता ती मस्ती आनी लाड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. आवय म्हाका गोंयची माती चिटीन थोडी धाड गे. Those of us who are born in 60s and 70s have seen different Goa. Those huge banyan trees, people trees. Then the fear about going in the darknesses. This poem will take you to that era. कोण आसा थंय? Who is there? काळखेले रातीर पिसडुल्ली न्हीद. काळखेले रातीर पिसडुल्ली न्हीद. अंतुले बिदीन जाणटेली चीज. अंतुले बिदीन जाणटेली चीज. चिचेच्या मुळांत फुटिल्लो नीस. चिचेच्या मुळांत फुटिल्लो नीस. निचाच्या फुडें केगदीची वय थरथरून हालता. थरथरून हालता कोण आसा थंय. थरथरून हालता कोण आसा थंय. रानाच्या वण्ण्यार. रानाच्या वण्ण्यार म्हारिल्ली काज. काजीच्या मुळसांत अनाची पाज. पाजीच्या आड्याक आळवतीचो फोण. पाजीच्या आड्याक आळवतीचो फोण. मोडिल्लो खुरीसान दुकराची कोण. कोणीच्या पाणयान शिरशिरता मय. कोणीच्या पाणयान शिरशिरता मय. अमाशे रातीर कोण आसा थंय. अमाशे रातीर कोण आसा थंय. शिमेच्या गोंयण्यार बोडकेलो वड. शिमेच्या गोंयण्यार बोडकेलो वड. तांबडेल्यो गुडयो. तांबडेल्यो गुडयो गुगमाची रड. मध्यानी रातीर मारवाच्यो कुलो. मध्यानी रातीर मारवाच्यो कुलो. दोंगराचेर घुमी कोण मारता उलो. उल्याचेर उलो भिवपुरी लय. उल्याचेर उलो भिवपुरी लय. जरगते रातीर कोण आसा थंय. व्हाळाचे मुशीर. व्हाळाचे मुशीर मसनाची वाट. व्हाळाचे मुशीर मसनाची वाट. वाटेच्या खाला राम पुरसाचें भाट. वाटेच्या खाला रामपुरसाचें भाट, भाटांतले कुडीत नाल्लाची रास. भाटांतल्या कुडीत नाल्लाची रास, खिळखिता दार पूण कोणाक नास. खिळखिता दार पूण कोणाक नास. कितें निम्याचो भंय? निम्याचो भंय? वचून तूं पळय. भिरांकूळ रातीर कोण आसा थंय? भिरांकूळ रातीर कोण आसा थंय? My last poem of the evening. जेन्ना भाटां विकून सोंपलीं. विकून विकून जेन्ना सगळीं भाटां विकून सोंपलीं. विकून विकून जेन्ना सगळीं भाटां विकून सोंपलीं. बिल्डिंगेची बियां थोडीं शेतान व्हरून ओंपलीं. विकून विकून जेन्ना सगळीं भाटां विकून सोंपलीं. बिल्डिंगेची बियां व्हरून शेतान थोडीं ओंपलीं. थोड्याच तेंपान शेतान जालें बिल्डिंगेचें रान. थोड्याच तेंपान शेतान जालें बिल्डिंगेचें रान. आनी पयस देशाक पळून गेलें. आनी पयस देशाक पळून गेलें कोगुळाचें गान. पयस देशाक पळून गेलें कोगुळाचें गान. कापून कापून आमी सगळीं दोंगरा रानां कापलीं. कापून कापून आमी सगळीं दोंगरा रानां कापलीं. थोडीं बिल्डिंगांनी थोडीं कचऱ्यान व्हरून धांपलीं. थोडीं बिल्डिंगांनी थोडीं कचऱ्यान व्हरून धांपलीं. काजी आंब्या चवराचो. काजी आंब्या चवराचो पयस गेलो गंध. काजी आंब्या चवराचो पयस गेलो गंध. इतिहासांत शेणून गेले सुरणाचे कंद. इतिहासांत शेणून गेले सुरणाचे कंद. गरीब रस्त्यार रडटना आमी दोळ्यार ओडली तोपी. गरीब रस्त्यार रडटना आमी दोळ्यार ओडली तोपी. कितल्यो खाल्ल्यो डोजरांनी धनगरांच्यो खोपी. कितल्यो खाल्ल्यो डोजरांनी धनगरांच्यो खोपी. शेवटाक नजरो आमचे मांडवीचेर पडल्यो. शेवटाक नदरो आमच्यो मांडवीचेर पडल्यो. जुगाराच्यो बोटी हाडून हड्ड्यार तिच्या सोडल्यो. जुगाराच्यो बोटी हाडून हड्ड्यार तिच्या सोडल्यो. विकपा सारकें आमच्या लागीं कांयच आतां उरूंक ना. विकपा सारकें आमच्या लागीं कांयच आतां उरूंक ना. सगळें विकून सोंपलें तरी भुको आमच्यो मरूंक ना. सगळें विकून सोंपलें तरी भुको आमच्यो मरूंक ना. देव बरें करूं.
देव तुकाय बरो करूं रमेश बाब. He gave us some beautiful poems. म्हाका कांयच फरक पडचो ना. If you didn't care for me in my life and my old age, to hell with you after I'm dead. I don't care what happens. And avoi म्हाका गोंयची माती चिट्टीन थोडी धाड गे. Send me a little go on earth in that letter that you write. And of course on darkness. कोण आसा थंय? I like the way he said darknesses. Very often we are used to saying just darkness. There are darknesses in our lives, different kinds of darknesses. Thank you, Ramesh Bab. And now I request our guests, our speakers to kindly take their seats. As we now I request our guests, our speakers to kindly take their seats. As we get ready for our book discussion with Vidya the Hejia. William Dalrymple. Mr. Dalrymple, in conversation with Vidya the Hejia. To please, may I request Mr. Dalrymple and sir, you'll have had 13 literature festivals in Goa. What was the use of all that? What did you all achieve? Look at Gaza, man. They are still bombing the hell out of them. Look at Ukraine. Look at America. They elected Trump again. Yeah, I said yes. They elected Trump. And we elected a government which is so proud and so tolerant of, everyone and such noble upholders of democracy. Yes, the US elected Trump again. And they said, what are you all doing to save the world? You all don't make any change. You all can't save the world in any way. I said, why are you asking us writers to save the world and change the world? Why don't you go and ask the fisherman or the baker or ask the parish priest what he's doing to save the world? Why can't you just leave us to write our books and to be in conversation and to have our biryani and beers after the Lit Fest? So that was a question which showed that he seemed to have to look to writers that we would do something better to save the world or to improve the world in some way. And I asked myself, with all of the world turning to the far right and getting more and more intolerant, what do we do as writers? In that great sea of intolerance and violence and unhappiness and bigotry, I think we throw life buoys to each other while we are sinking, as the Titanic goes down, holding on to that plank of wood. We throw life jackets, we throw life buoys, and while we are hanging on there to those planks, we also tell all those survivors to look up at the sky, see how beautiful the moon is. We had a red moon last night. I wonder where it is right now. And perhaps that's what we do as writers.